And Kilifi Governor graces our set this morning, Honorable Gideon Mung'aro, as we take a look at what is of devolution, a very important conversation that we're set to have later on the broadcast at around 8 a.m. But away from it, we also discuss the politics that is taking shape in the country, the end of an era. Chebukati 3 get to exit the stage. Just what way forward? It looks like it's a murky, future for the IEBC. What will it take for them to form another commission as early and as speedy as possible, so that in the event of, activities that would require the guidance and the spearheading of the IEBC, then we'll definitely not get into that state of despondence. Welcome on board. It's good to have you. Karibu sana. Later on, we'll also be getting to speak matters beauty right here. And of course, we welcome your feedback. The hashtag is Morning Cafe at Linda_Lela TV47KE. Great conversation set for you. We hope that you could be part of the broadcast from right now and going all the way to 9:30. And yes, as always, it's good to have you. We first of all take a look at the Standard newspaper, the Daily Nation and the People Daily before we look at the stories that we have prepared as a team, and then later on to this very important conversations that we speak of. Also, we take a look at this conversation on the clamor for change or amending the constitution, and definitely looking at what is left of our students in relation to matters education and so much more. So what do the papers tell us this morning? The Daily Nation speaks of Form 1 blues for KCPE stars parents. Those are the key things that have been going on, especially as to the question of education. And the Form 1 selection results were announced yesterday. Due jubilation among candidates who secured, their preferred schools, but sparked a protest from those placed in far-flung institutions. They actually did not choose. Some disgruntled, and of course parents vowed not to take their children to these institutions, even as Education CS Machogu said that the computerized process was guided by the principles of merit, choice, equity, and availability of space. This as captured on page 2 and 3, right on the front page, expounded further on these pages that I have spoken to. And so learners are set to report to school between February the 6th and 13th as grade 6 results are out. Away from it, Chebukati's confessions, the wishes he would have for this very important commission. And of course, he says it is important that we have some adjustments, readjustments that will make sure that this entity is sanitized. The very first commissioners to have gone all the way to the last bit of their 6-year term, the 3 of them. And of course, they speak of a parting shot that is largely about what reforms then the electoral body should have. The electoral agency has asked President William Ruto, that is to order a public inquiry into the events leading to the declaration of the final results of the August 9, 2022 presidential election. And of course, Mr. Wafula Chebukati, the outgoing IEBC chairperson, also revealed that the poll witnessed the highest number of attempts to undermine the independence of the agency and usurp its powers. And of course, this is a conversation that certainly we need to have as a country, so that even as we get the next commissioners, then of course there's going to be some level of sanity and respect for this independent entity. If Masit survives, then perhaps she would be that one person who steers the wheel, as we await to see how a tribunal will be formed and how an entity to make sure that at least we have the IEBC commission again. Of course, with representatives is one thing that we'll be looking forward to. And so we'll be having this conversation alongside the gentleman that I will be introducing shortly, as we look at just what way forward the IEBC after the exit of these 3. Those are the key stories that have been captured on the front page of the Daily Nation. We shift gears briefly and take a look at what the Standard newspaper speaks of. Yes, and here we are. The Standard newspaper as well speaks of the commissioners went into hiding after poll results, and what it is that they were, just trying to highlight yesterday in relation to the experience of the August 9th election. The IEBC bosses reveal that last moments after announcing poll outcome, as chairperson Wafula Chebukati calls for thorough probe, a story captured on page 8, and President William Ruto alluding to that sometime on the 4th of January this year, while he was speaking to the press of his plans for what it is the Kenya Kwanza government has in store for the people. And away from its dream schools, the top KCPE pupils will join, and those who excelled in examination have been picked to attend popular schools. But unfortunately, teachers let down 37,000 pupils who did not select any school. Parents told not to pay fee for junior secondary. A story captured on page 2, 4, 5, and 6. The adjustments in the education sector will be trying to highlight and decipher on the same to get to understand whether we are on a good trajectory. Court allows more polling station scrutiny in Wajir. That's a story captured on page 7. This also as we continue to look into the events of the August 9th, and as well, looking at some of the by-elections that have been conducted thereafter. And Gatundu residents reject plan for new dam, a story captured on page 21. Just what could be informing this. We'll be delving deep into this conversation as we continue with the broadcast. Those ones are the key stories on the Standard newspaper. Briefly of what it is that the People Daily speaks of, also speaks of the exit of Wafula Chebukati 3. We faced dark days. This is what they said, that is yesterday, and the gravity of these attempts to subvert, that is the will of the people, cannot be wished away. They say that investigations need to be conducted as to this, or this cannot as well be swept under the carpet because they might re-emerge in future. And therefore, they have given proposals of what really needs to be done to address this very matter. Abdi Gulie as well, highlighting his experience and what then they leave behind for the IEBC. He says, "We went into hiding. We left our phones at Bomas, sent away our security, and drove to an unknown location in Anoam." Of course, we used to rely on television news to know what was happening in the country. Interesting times in the history of this nation as pertaining to the electoral process. End of an era, as one would want to call it. IEBC bosses get to recount how state officers put them under pressure to alter poll results. A look at the tumultuous 6-year term or journey at the helm, and what they think of the own performance. What report says on the election. This is a story captured on page 4, 5, and 6. Kenyan arrested over DRC terror aid. Probe launched as at least 10 killed and 39 are hurt during attack on church in North Kivu region. That as well is a story that is on the front page of the Daily Nation. Just what informs this terror attacks? What will it take for us to see sanity restored in this very rich nation that really its citizens have not been able to enjoy the greatness of the resources that the nation is endowed with? Away from it, 2022 tea sales defy COVID-19 and hit 137 billion at auction. Of course, a good trajectory. This even as the deputy president has been tasked by the president to oversee just how best we can return sanity in the tea sector as well as the coffee sector. And away from its big rush for Form 1 placements, our places questions as over 148,000 seek admission in 2 schools with capacity to accept only 576 students. These adjustments we'll be looking at this as students are encouraged to check out the schools that they have been placed to, and as they make this crucial decision of transition from class 8 and proceeding to Form 1, and also those ones who sat for the class 6 examinations as well, domiciled within their very own institutions, with a proposal of change of uniform and a bit of adjustments in terms of payment of fees, which is supposed to give a reprieve to the parents. We'll be looking at all this as we continue. Allow us to briefly pick some of the stories that my team has worked on. And teachers, parents, and other education stakeholders have been urged to fully involve themselves in the Form 1 selection process. That is to ensure students get support and guidance when choosing their preferred secondary schools. And as Andrin Kilemi now reports, Education CS Ezekiel Machogu says at least 33,984 students from 2,673 schools missed out on their schools of choice, even as other schools recorded extremely high number of requests as compared to their capacity.
All the 1.2 million candidates who sat their Kenya Certificate of Primary Education examination last year will join secondary schools. According to Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu, all candidates who scored 400 marks and above were placed in national or extra-county schools of their choice.
The government is committed to ensure that each and every learner progresses from primary to secondary school. To address barriers to secondary education, the Ministry will continue working with the Ministry of Interior and the coordination of national government to facilitate the enrollment of every child in secondary school.
The selection exercise, which is the last for learners under the 844 system, further revealed that a large number of candidates did not receive proper guidance while choosing schools. Statistics show that some schools had an overwhelming number of applicants compared to their capacity.
During the selection process, it became clear that a large number of candidates did not receive proper guidance and direction when choosing schools. This resulted in some schools attracting far many applicants against their capacities.
Kabianga High School tops the list of schools that attracted far many applicants, with over 153,000 candidates against a capacity of 768. Nanyuki High School and Nyandarua High School also had a high number of applicants, with 148,827 and 137,511 respectively, against their capacity of 576 and 240. Other schools that recorded extremely high number of requests include Pangani Girls High School, Maseno School, Alliance Girls High School, Nakuru High School, Kapsabet Boys, Mangu High School, and Butere Girls High School.
Thank you very much.
Education CS now calling on parents, teachers and other education stakeholders to ensure our candidates make wise choices through proper guidance. The long wait for parents, teachers and the over 1.2 million candidates who sat their Kenya Certificate of Primary Education test last year has come to an end, with the candidates now expected to join their respective secondary schools starting February 6th this year. Andrin Kilemi, TV47, Nairobi.
And in the same breath, over 1.2 million grade 6 students who sat for their Kenya Primary Education Assessment exam are expected to receive their results. And Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu also announced that junior secondary students will be wearing a different school uniform from the rest of the students, as Collins Lusweti details.
After many questions over transition into junior secondary education, Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu had plenty of answers. No fees will be imposed on grade 7 learners in public day schools unless the school has a boarding section. Machogu says the government has set aside 9.6 billion shillings to facilitate learning activities in public junior secondary schools.
There will be no school fees payable in any of our public schools because you know that this is the constitutional requirement that the basic education, primary to secondary, is compulsory and free.
Additionally, the Teacher Service Commission is in the process of recruiting 30,000 new teachers, majority of whom will be attached to junior secondary, with graduate teachers currently in primary schools given first priority.
So the issue of lack of teachers to teach in junior secondary school does not arise, and they have also been accordingly prepared to undertake this particular assignment.
The new grade 7 learners are expected to report on January 30th, with the majority of primary schools meeting the Ministry of Education standards on hosting junior secondary schools. The grade 7 learners will wear different uniforms from the rest of the students.
So we are also saying that at this particular level, because it is secondary, the uniform will not be the same. And each and every board of management will be able to make a decision as to the color and the type of uniform that students will be required to put on. And of course, as is the case, parents would have to bear the responsibility of buying uniforms for their children.
A number of parents have reacted to the directive requiring grade 7 students to wear a different school uniform from the rest.
Kidogo tu kiwazo badala ya kupima ile walikuwa nayo wapime kwanza sahi. Si wamekaa nyumbani karibu mwezi miwili na hiyo uniform nafikiri alafu wamekula zaidi. Siri sasa waanze tu kubadilishwa.
Kama ni upande ya kuendelea the same school, mimi ningependa at least ikuwe tu ni the same uniform. Kwa the same uniform, in the same school.
It's all system go for grade 6 learners who are expected to join junior secondary school come next term, or rather grade 7. Although in the same school, but they find comfort in the fact that they will be in a slightly different school uniform from the rest. That is grade 1 to grade 7. Collins Luseti, TV 47.
And to also this, a very important story that we'll be deciphering on. IEBC Chairperson Wafula Chebukati and 2 other commissioners, Professor Abdi Guliye and Boya Molu, have said they have no regrets or apologies to make during their tenure at the Commission's helm. The 3 who presided over the last public engagement before their final day in office also recalled the bomber skills and how they saved their lives. TV 47's Apollo Kamau reports on an exit with a mixed bag of fortunes for IEBC commissioners.
After serving 6 years since taking over office in 2017 and overseeing 2 presidential elections and a repeat poll, IEBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati and 2 commissioners, Professor Abdi Guliye and Bolumoya, held their final public engagement as commissioners, with Tuesday being their final day in office. The 3 saying they leave office with their heads held high, adding that they have no apologies to make from a tenure that saw them stand firm against a heavy onslaught to remove them from office.
This launch marks my last duty as the chairman of the commission. I exceed a very contented man, and I say we gave it our best. We charted and weathered the storms that threatened the existence of the commission. We endured relentless fatigue in our preparation for election. We mustered high courage to overcome perils of democracy, and we delivered the sacred will of the people of Kenya.
As I leave office, I am satisfied that I did my best for my country and my people. I leave IEBC stronger and better than I found it. And as I leave, I have no apologies to make to anybody.
The journey of IEBC as institution must continue. Despite who comes and leaves, the commission must remain and must continue, because minus IEBC, Kenya cannot stand.
Despite the 3 commissioners' honorable exit, the picture is not so rosy for the Cherera 4, who are facing charges before the Aggrey Mchelule-led tribunal that will resume its sittings next week to determine their fate. Chebukati and his fellow commissioners recalling the bombers' fiasco that nearly cost them their lives.
I recall going into Siberia in my own country together with Commissioner Molu and CEO Marjan. We went into hiding. We had to put off our phones, leave them in bombers, send away our security, and we rode in a Noah to a unknown location.
I also thank God that we have made it to the end of our 6-year journey, where for the entire period, removal from office has always been hanging on our head. But with the grace of God, we have made it to this.
They say 3 musketeers. And so they went into Siberia, but they are not telling me where I was. Of course, I was in my house, taking my cups of tea and waiting if anybody is coming on the door. Of course, nobody came.
EU Envoy Henriette Geiger, Attorney General Justin Muturi, and Council of Governors Chairperson Anne Waiguru, among other leaders, paying tribute to Chebukati and the IEBC team for having navigated through the landmines.
These patriots deliver the election results that make Kenya's election the pinnacle of Africa's democratic experience. Lost in the noise at Bomas is the story of these patriots. Even when some pay the ultimate price for their integrity with their lives, as happened with the returning officer in Embakasi.
Chebukati has cited the enrollment of 2.7 million new voters and increased voter registration centers in the diaspora as some of his achievements, coupled with election technology, a public election portal, and the audit of the voters' register that addressed election systemic challenges, making the 2022 election a success. Chebukati and the two commissioners' exit marks a new chapter in the life of IEBC, a new team, and a raft of reforms for a stable 2027 general election. Apol Kamau, TV47 in Nairobi.
Still on that, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati led his co-commissioners to the launch of the post-election evaluation report for the August 9th, 2022 general election. This was their last public official engagement, as he said, before leaving office, and of course their 6-year tenure at the helm of the commission. Micah Gungu with that report.
IEBC Chairman Wafula Chebukati led his commissioners Monday to the launch of the post-election evaluation report for the 9th August 2022 general election, reflecting on the 6-year term, which he says was successful despite a few shortcomings. The outgoing chair admitting that IEBC may have not been fully prepared for the August 2017 general election, which was nullified, and it had worked on achieving a credible election since then. Chebukati said the commission had asked President William Ruto to form a public inquiry for investigation to determine the level of government interference before the announcement of the presidential results in the August 2022 election.
The outcome of the inquiry, we believe, will bolster the independence of the commission and ensure that it maintains the stature contemplated by the Constitution. It will also enable a future election environment devoid of harassment, intimidation, profiling, and harm of commission staff while discharging their duties.
Allow me now to
The commission addressed the gaps identified in the legal framework and subsequently drafted and submitted bills to Parliament for enactment. However, Chebukati said the proposed bills were not enacted, thus negatively impacting the conduct of elections. Further, last-minute court rulings affected the commission's operations against stringent legal and operational electoral timelines.
Additionally, the processes had already been concluded by the previous commission, and there was no time to make any major reviews or adjustments.
In the report, Chebukati said the results transmission system successfully transmitted all the 46,229 presidential results forms from the polling stations to the public portal, translating to 100% attainment rate. Additionally, over 380 million requests were made to access the presidential results forms. This, according to the outgoing chair, enhanced transparency of the 2022 presidential election results.
It's good manners internationally that election laws need to be passed at least 2 years before elections, or at worst 1 year before elections.
He said the audit of the register of voters was conducted and the commission implemented the recommendations made therein. The outgoing commissioners termed delays in passing of the election laws and irregular funding as the main challenges they faced during their 6 years tenure in the office.
We have the 13th Parliament, which I'm sure should look at these bills and pass the necessary amendments to the election law, at least 2 years or at least 1 year before elections, so that the commission can prepare adequately.
Whereas the commission received 100% funding of its budget, there were delays in the exchequer release. He said the non-operationalization of the IEBC fund further hindered adequate preparations for the 2022 general elections. However, if the commission is not controlled, Chebukati said interference from outside players with vested interest may reappear in future, insisting on the need to initiate an investigation.
It's expected that the commission be funded throughout the 5-year electoral cycle, but this doesn't happen, and we normally get funding the last election year. This hampers our electoral activities.
In his report, Chebukati said the commission conducted elections for Kenyan citizens residing outside the country in 12 jurisdictions, namely United States of America, United Kingdom, Canada, United Arab Emirates, among others. This was progressive compared to 2017, whereby the commission conducted elections in only 5 countries in Africa. The 3 go into history books as the first set of electoral officers to complete their constitutional term. Mike Kagwongo, TV 47, Nairobi.
All right, the process to replace the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission IEBC commissioners, whose term has come to an end, and others who have resigned, has officially begun. A selection panel for the appointment of new electoral commissioners is set to be constituted. An outgoing IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati, Commissioner Abdi Gulie, and Commissioner Boya Molu are expected to serve the commission until the close of business today. But what happens next to fill these vacancies? Moiga William has more on the story.
It is the end of an era for Wafula Chebukati, sitting at the helm of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission after serving in the commission for 6 consecutive years, starting January 2017. And now, Chebukati, together with Commissioners Boya Molu and Abdi Gulie, will go down in history as commissioners who went against all odds to successfully conclude their constitutional term. Chebukati now sharing some words of wisdom to those who will succeed him.
6 years we have seen. We need men and women who are of integrity, who are impartial, who are ready to serve the country. If you are partisan in nature, or if you are sponsored by an individual or political party, that IEBC is not a place for you.
To those who will be bearing the responsibility of replacing us with other Kenyans, is that the IEBC office as chair or commissioners is not for the faint-hearted.
The development also means that the commission will not be legally constituted as of Tuesday, as 3 other commissioners resigned last month to avoid facing a tribunal over their conduct during the August 2022 presidential election. Vice Chair Juliana Cherera, Francis Wanderi, and Justice Nyanza called it quits last month to avoid facing the Justice Aggrey Muchelule-led tribunal set to probe their conduct after disowning results of the August 2022 presidential election. It is also likely to impact the Commission's ongoing delimitation on boundaries exercise set to be concluded by 2024, with stakeholders now calling for a speedy creation of a selection panel.
IEBC needs to be insulated against any interference or attempts of the same by any other organs of state or individuals. These commissions and independent offices must be protected.
A proposal has been made to change the composition of the selection panel for the appointment of electoral commissioners by reducing the 4 slots allocated to the Parliamentary Service Commission to 2, and have the Public Service Commission and Political Parties Liaison Committee nominate 1 person each. The Justice and Legal Affairs Committee is currently compiling public views before presenting a report to the National Assembly.
So we moved with speed, and I'm happy that the National Assembly, before going to recess, and passed that legislative proposal, and that now, Honorable Kaduri, I'm happy that you have actually called the House.
And on Thursday this week, we have been recalled from our recess or our holiday to come back so that we can prosecute that bill on Thursday, the 19th of this week. This bill will give the process on how the new commissioners will be recruited.
Parliament, as you vet commissioners, please ensure the commission is not populated by political stooges. This is a national commission, it is not a place for political rewards.
According to a previous ruling by the Supreme Court, the IEBC is fully constituted when it has at least 3 commissioners, which will not be the case starting January 18, 2023, until new commissioners take the oath of office. Mwige William, TV47, Nairobi.
Look for us in the street.
And yes, that is a selection panel, not tribunal. Away from it, Victor Bwire has been convicted by Nairobi Milimani Court of conspiring with terrorists to blow up Nairobi's Kenyatta International Convention Center, KICC, in January 2019. Chichi Josephine reports.
Bwire appeared before Senior Principal Magistrate Bernard Ochoi and was convicted of conspiring with terrorists to bomb the Kenyatta International Convention Center in 2019.
There is no doubt that the accused person knew KICC very well, having worked for a company called Altec Africa, as confirmed by PW2, a principal security officer at KICC, and his workmate then by the name Martin Dolo.
According to the senior principal magistrate, Bwire admitted that he had been enrolled to collect intelligence reports on KICC's security details, parking areas and its environs prior to the attack by terrorists.
The accused collected and transmitted information on security arrangements of Kenyatta International Conference Center using his mobile phone and Infix 04+. On a Facebook account, Mohamed Yari Abdallah, which information was to be used in commission of a terrorist act.
Bwire is alleged to have opened 3 Facebook accounts which he used to collect data and disseminate the same to Somalia, as well as to the recruiting mastermind Mohamed Yari Abdallah.
The accused himself in his defense admitted to have opened the Facebook accounts and having been the one communicating with the alleged persons.
The magistrate further stated that, according to prosecution, a forensic analysis of phones seized from Bwire showed that he had sent information on KICC's security arrangement to contacts in Somalia.
The accused collected and transmitted information on security arrangements of Kenyatta International Conference Center using his mobile phone and Infix 04+.
The court revealed that the evidence adduced before it by an FBI detective, Scott John, gave links to the impending terror attack on government buildings, including Supreme Court, KICC and NSSF buildings in Nairobi.
It is my finding that the collection and transmission of the information about KICC and looked at cumulatively, I find that the information was for no other purpose, but it was geared towards and meant to aid, and the accused is convicted.
After the information was revealed, government security forces were deployed to the targeted buildings and undercover detectives were placed in key areas around the targeted government offices to collect information and data that led to the arrest of Bwire and his co-accused Yare. Chichi Josephine, TV47.
All right, Moshendu, we have begun the conversation, yes, and it's very important because we're also discussing, important matters and, just trying to look at some of the stories that we have also worked on and perhaps developing stories for that very matter. Executive Order number 1, 2023. President William Ruto making adjustments, just trying to accord some duties to specific offices. And also, speaking of how best he'd wish for this country and the arms of government for that matter to work. First of all, he speaks of a scenario where he would like for his deputy to make sure that there's a proper, a relationship between the devolved units as well as, the government, and also calling upon Musalia Mudavadi to make sure that there is a proper relationship between the executive and the National Assembly, or better yet, Parliament, so to speak. Calling upon another face to look at the question of the judiciary, that is Justin Muturi. Please make sure that you ensure that we have proper coordination and complementing each other with the judiciary. But just what is the importance of that? Even in making these adjustments, he proceeds to say that his deputy is going to look at the coffee and the tea matter, and that's what we are looking at this morning alongside this gentleman. And because I had not planned to look for it, I'll just ask for them to, speak to that briefly before we look at other stories that have been captured on the papers this morning, as well as those ones that we've worked on, very, very pertinent matters that require our attention. And, just our submissions in relation to that, hoping that it lands in the ears of the right people and the necessary adjustments then made. Kevin Osido, governance expert, is with us this morning, and also the executive director, County Governance Watch. It's good to have you. Thank you so much for creating a time. Another governance expert in Peter Mushendu. Peter, good morning. Yeye alikataa kusimama governor, anajiita tu governor. Kujiita tu jina, kufurahia. The way you call yourself president. Hoping that someday. Really, do you have maono ya kuwa governor at some point?
Well, active politics is not a joke.
Yes.
And most of the time, most people who get to active politics end up losing themselves.
Is it?
And the purpose why they were even going for those seats. Nonetheless, doesn't mean I don't have ambitions, but I want to do it when it's right. I don't want to do it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe watu wanaweza sema ni uoga. They might say, maybe I don't have enough cash to run a campaign. But so be it, that's part of politics.
I hope you do not come to regret, because he's amongst the chief campaigners, was among the chief campaigners of this hustler government that we see today. And so seeing it installed successfully tells you that, well, he has the stamina, just why he does not...
Well, I really am very optimistic that this government will deliver. Of course, it's not going to be 100% in the first 5 years. It's the reason why a president is always given a second term, so that probably in the first term you're given an opportunity to lay out the infrastructure or the plans to move this country forward. So I'm very optimistic that this government is going to deliver. And that's the most important thing for me. We vigorously campaigned for the Honorable William Ruto to become the 5th President of the Republic.
Yeah.
And we did this in belief that we are going to make a significant positive change in this nation. And I still believe that is those are goals that we can realize. And I believe that so far, this government is setting up the right steps toward changing this country for the better.
And we're looking forward to that. Nordin Kagai, Wakili, thank you so much for creating time. This gentleman I haven't met this year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Mko salama kabisa, eh?
Kabisa.
Asante sana for creating time. Era of tea cartels over, Gachagua says as he pledges deep reforms.
Well, I will say this, and this I say because I was looking, I'm a very passionate when it comes to health matters.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the statistics that were done when the previous government was about to roll out the universal health care, which has never started to date. But if you look at those statistics, they will tell you that the county that is leading in non-communicable diseases is the county of Nyeri. And especially arthritis, which is now being associated with the weather that comes with them being tea growers. But when you look at the returns of what makes them get those non-communicable diseases, it is almost non-existent. If I tell you today that one of the tea production that has a lot of demand in Europe and in the Middle East, it is the Kenyan tea. We have grown one of the tea that can be able to be combined with tea from Brazil and bring out very good products. And therefore, it is not about market. In fact, as a nation, we cannot satisfy the world market with our tea. So that tells you the problem is not where we are selling coffee or selling our tea. Because when you look at the cost of how much our tea is being sold at the international coffee or international tea auctions, it will tell you that we are being paid enough money to be able to sort our farmers. But why is that not happening? Because it is true. The middleman here in the Republic is also the person who is getting that tea from the farmers. So he is making a cut that is so, I think, 3 or 4 times of what the farmer is supposed to make. And yet, this is the farmer who has to go through the process of layering that tea from initiation to all the way to that tea being packed. So I think the work for the Deputy President is as simple as it comes. It is not even about looking who is the cause organism of the poor prices that we have. He needs to separate the auction from the people who are processing our tea. Because the same people who are processing our tea are the same people who are deciding on the cost of tea at our international and national auctions. So what we must do is that the guaranteed minimum returns must be made a reality.
Yes.
Very early in the game. So that person who is waking up very early to go and pluck tea, it does not matter whether it is raining or it is foggy or it is cold, tea has to be plucked.
Does it require for us to go to a space where we even say that we'd want legal forms, or are they even there, of protecting some of these farmers, Wakili? Because looking at this happening the way it is, to a point where this is accorded to the Deputy President, and others then would look at it as, a way of trying to tell him that, as President, I am not so happy with you, and therefore I will just accord you this funny, from what it is that some people have said, duties, and that, of course, I will throw to Kevin. But before then, do we have to get legal mechanisms of addressing some of these matters for the coffee farmers, for the tea farmers, because it is dire, it is extreme, and it's not the first time that we're talking about this?
First and foremost, I tend to believe that we don't have lack of laws in this country. We have abundance of laws. And it's not just about the tea and the coffee. Our farming has a lot of problems. Farmers across board have a lot of issues. And the issues can only be, so as he rightfully said, I can just simplify what he said into government goodwill. If they have goodwill to actually help the farmers, believe you me, it will be done. Those middlemen or purported cartels, which we're being told are cartels, can be dealt with if you really care about that farmer. I read their plan, their manifesto, and if at all they intend to implement what they said they would, then the farmer should be happy. But at the end of the day, it stems down to goodwill, because we can make as many legislations, as many laws as we want, but practicability and implementing is always a problem. So if there is goodwill from the government, and the Minister for Agriculture will actually make sure, in conjunction with the Deputy President who has been given the role there, will actually make sure that they actually help the farmers realize the importance of farming, and actually, because most of the farmers actually say they farm so they can educate their children for their own livelihoods. So it doesn't make sense for you to put so much money into farming and it doesn't bear any fruits. So I believe since, as he rightfully said, it's a government for the hustlers, it should be easy for them to implement it, as we also have the legal mechanism. But it all stems and starts from goodwill. If there's goodwill, it starts, and the farmers will be happy moving forward.
Okay, to argue that this is just any other office, and an interesting office to accord, or duty to accord to a Deputy President, is interesting to hear. What do you make of this, and just how dire and how important is this are these very sectors, and what reforms do you expect out of the coming in of the Deputy President in terms of addressing the same? As he says, it's an end of an era for these very cartels. It's clear that indeed these sectors are, sort of captured by these very cartels. And as Peter Mushendo would argue, you do not just wake up and imagine all these, stakeholders who appear to be against the cartels, you're going to root out anyhow.
Linda, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think that the President and his deputy are, in my view, trying to deal with perennial issues. And as you rightfully said earlier on at the beginning, it's not the first time we're talking about coffee and tea. But from a deeper sense of it, I read a lot of politics, in the sense that, and if you listen to the deputy president, many times he has said, sisi ndio tunajua what we did to put this government into office. And so they are looking at the needs and probably the prayers of the so many people that they spoke to be able to galvanize the support and the mobilization of network sectors to be able to support the Kenya Kwanza government and therefore to put it into office. Now, politically speaking, they will have to do everything possible to ensure that they pacify the spirits of those who supported the government. And from Mount Kenya, of course, coffee and tea becomes a very critical sector that you therefore want to look at. And that's not the only one. You've heard, of course, the issues that the deputy president has with the governor of Nairobi around the matatu sector and the parking and all those things. Of course, you would imagine a deputy president arguing over issues of where matatus are going to be parked and to be parking. But it's purely based on the manner in which the narrative around Kenya Kwanza was sold to the people. And so within the coffee and the tea farmers, so that particular sector, probably the issues around cartels were some of the biggest concerns that the farmers therefore had. So to be able to bestow his deputy president, the president probably is looking at the deputy as his deputy as an insider who understands the issues around coffee and tea farming, who probably understands part, if not all, of the cartels and what they need to do to deal with those cartels. and he's imagining that with the tough-talking nature of Rigiji, then he probably is able to scare the cartels. But I think beyond the cartels, there is a lot that therefore needs to be done, ranging from value chain, from when the farmers begin to plow, their farms, the preparation processes into planting coffee and tea, to all the way into the markets, and even how much money the farmer back in Nyeri or in Kericho or wherever, Kirinyaga areas, how much they get from the coffee and tea that is exported exported outside the country. There is a lot that needs to be talked about, including intergovernmental relations between county governments, particularly those that grow coffee and tea, and the involvement of national government, including parastatals like Coffee Board of Kenya. What is the role of CBK in terms of the Coffee Board of Kenya, in terms of coffee and even Kenya Tea Development Authority, KTDA, when it comes to the growth of tea and how much the issues that the farmers have are actually addressed? Because, Linda, sometimes it really baffles me that we only hear about the farmers around coffee and tea in a broader sense of it during politics, particularly when they're being mobilized to support XYZ candidate or political party. But on a day-to-day running, why are farmers in Murang'a, for example, pouring milk, because it's not just about coffee and tea. There are much more deeper things that I believe that Kenyans, and particularly those who grow coffee, tea, and those who undertake farming, really get involved in, all the way to Missouri, where I come from. Why must the fish be put into big containers and taken to Thika? What is the value of the farmers, around that particular area? How much money do they get to be able to benefit from what they actually wake up to do every single day? A game of interest somehow, and now that you speak of politics, maybe as we sum it up on that matter, and perhaps as much as we all agree that this is the president of the country, this is the deputy president of the entire country, there's some essence of interest in there, the fact that these people hail from these very regions where then coffee is grown, and these very regions that tea then is grown. Maybe it's going to be different because then it will be about our people. That's what it's supposed to be, but unfortunately it doesn't have to be so minimized to be brought into our people, our issues, because you are a president and a deputy president of the Republic of Kenya. So it doesn't have to be brought much more closer into looking at our own interests and how we pacify the needs of our people. And that's why, to some extent, I liked what the president said during his the retreat at Sagana, because he said, you as a PS, as a director of government, as a cabinet secretary, don't just visit your people. You must ensure that whatever you do is for the people of Kenya who voted for this government. And that, in my view, should be the kind of spirit that the government bears when it begins to deal with issues around coffee and tea. It doesn't have to be seen as just dealing with our people's issues. It has to transcend and go beyond our people into looking at even the other secondary beneficiaries. For instance, the coffee consumers in the UK, you know, the people who buy our tea in Dubai, how do they interact? How is it packaged? How is it marketed? So that then Kenya benefits in a much more broader sense as opposed to just looking at how we pacify the issues. Of course, where the coffee and the tea comes from has to be the primary concern, because those are the people who produce that particular product. But then beyond that, how do we therefore move over to the value chain, issues around value addition, and then pacifying the interests of the consumers and everyone who wants to really get proud around the coffee and tea that comes from Kenya.
Okay, before we get to this clamor for, you know, constitutional review or change, let's briefly take a look at the events of the weekend in terms of the visit of the president. And now that we're talking about regions and who supported you the most and whether this is your region or not, and who is to benefit more from the proceeds of the government, because, well, according to the leaders, then would say that every Kenyan is supposed to benefit from this very government because they're there to serve us. But also listening to their utterances, it looks like, you know, hata kama hamkutupatia kura, tuko tu hapa tutawasort tu. It's not a problem. Na pia tukiwasort, let us consider next time, because 2027 is somewhere around the corner. Please, mtupange vizuri and all this. And what it is that, you know, has gotten a majority of these Nyanza leaders a little bit castigated, in the sense that they appear to have, you know what, you know, they're now trying to, you know, just be nice to the government for purposes of making, you know, their people get development. Just what do you make of this? I mean, can't we just celebrate it as it is, to say that this is good progress without pointing a finger, without reading politics in it, without, you know, exaggerating the whole matter?
Well, let me tell you, one of the reasons why, as a person, you seek leadership, it is to become a solution to the people you read.
Yeah.
And if that means working with that government of the day so that your people can benefit, so be it. Okay. And I want to applaud the Nyanza readers. Because
why should it be that, if the constitution dictates that every region should get this development regardless of who they voted, where they voted, how they voted, they are Kenyan? That's why the president then acknowledges, I am the president of the nation. Everybody should benefit, also, whether your leaders work with you.
As much as the rule of the law dictates that, there has to be the spirit of the law.
Okay.
And as a reader, if you do not create an enabling environment for that development to take place, then that becomes a problem. And if you ask me, in Kenya and so many other African nations, we learn what is called capitalist politics. It is politics of how do I relate with Rinda, how do I relate with Noldi. And I think for me, the Nyanza readers have understood that art very well. If you look at that photo right at your background, you will see someone like James Orengo, who has been around that circle for so many years. He understands what it means to work with government. And I will also tell you, one of the other, when you are elected as a president, William Ruto went to Nyanza for two particular reasons. One, he is the head of state, and he's supposed to be the unifying factor in the country. And he's the head of government, which is supposed to deliver services to the people. And Nyanza happens to be a part of Kenya. So that is one, he is fulfilling the responsibility he has been accorded by our constitution as the president of the republic and the leader of government. Number two, he's a politician. He has to make inroads. He has gone to Nyanza knowing very well very few people in Nyanza voted for him. And when you become president, as much as it is important for you to consolidate what you already have, it's also very important for you to go out of your way to try and gather what you were not able to gather in the previous election. So William Ruto is going there knowing very well that probably he may not get the entire region, but make no mistake, the kind of inroads he is making in Nyanza, he will definitely get a piece of the cake from there. So those are the two reasons he's going there.
So this is a polite way of telling him he's here for the rest of what? His 2 terms. Can we call that his 2 terms, you know?
He's actually trying to make them settle it in their mind.
Yes.
That I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be around. Please, guys, learn to work with me.
Okay.
Because I'm the head of state.
2 things. When I look at that photo, You know, that was meant to be Owalo's homecoming.
Yes.
Look at where he is. That tells you something. You know, there were those who were walking close to the president, those who are not elected leaders, and they thought they would be at the forefront. But it's good to see that the government is actually willing to work with elected leaders.
Okay.
Because you realize the problem is most of the time, the elected leaders would never be receptive. And that would mean now, sadly, you have to be receptive for the government to come and actually help your people, which is actually backward.
Yes.
You know, and that is what you're talking about. I believe it's actually good what he's doing, because he's on record saying that this government will work with all elected leaders, irrespective of party affiliations, which is actually commendable. You have to realize that James Aggrey Orengo is the governor of Siaya.
Yeah.
You cannot work in isolation. You have also to work with the national government. And that is why you see we have gotten to a point where governors in ODM can actually work with governors, with the government. Because at the end of the day, we need to move away from this notion that since I'm in this side, I can't speak to you. How are we leaders and we can't talk to one another in the same country? Then who are we serving?
Right.
You get? So I think our politics is maturing a bit.
Yeah.
How it evolves past that to 2027 and the near future is what we wait to see.
I don't know whether this change of tone is maturing, Nordin, that today, you know, Ruto is the worst person. The next day, Ruto is the government and the best person to work with. Allow us to take a short break. We'll come back. Okay. You respond to that. We speak to Kevin Osido. You know, this is his home area, so I don't know whether... well, after this break.
You are watching TV 47, the home of untold stories.
Sona moja imetengenezwa kwa njia spesheli ili kupambana na maumivu kwa haraka. Sona moja ina aspirin kama kiungo. Sona moja, kitulizo kamili. Maumivu yakizidi, pata ushauri wa daktari.
To 9 p.m.
Usiyakubalie maumivu ya misuli kukatiza ratiba yako. Kaluma Pain Balm ni dawa ya kusugua iliyotengenezwa kutoka kwa miche maalum ili kutuliza maumivu ya misuli. Kaluma Pain Balm. Shhh. Maumivu yakizidi, pata ushauri wa daktari.
You are watching TV 47, the home of untold stories.
Kevin Osido, Peter Mushendu, as well as Noreen Kagai. Gentlemen, it is about the Nyanza visit and how, you know, instrumental it is for the people of Nyanza to enjoy the fruits of government, but equally for the political journey of all these political figures that we see here and for posterity. One would have imagined that, you know, this gentleman, or let's speak about the two, the president maybe and as well as Agri Orengo would not see eye to eye based on how politics had been painted in the country. But this is contrary to what we see. Perhaps what we're always reminded, Dean, that this was the politicians. They will, insult each other on podiums, but they will take tea together. And maybe Kenyans, like you rightfully put it, are now getting to understand this.
This reminds you of Mandago. We are like lungs.
Oh, yes.
You breathe out after the elections and you move on.
That's true.
These are political cousins. The eye in interest is always constant.
Yeah.
Is my interest catered for? Yours, yes. We move. And that is how it is. And that is how Kenyans need to understand. It's not about, it's not a do or die contest. It's about interests that they actually look for once they are sorted. And now you see they are laughing. They were laughing. They were bosom buddies.
Yeah.
But we have to understand one thing. What the president did over the weekend was not a favor. The Nyanza reason, the people who live there actually pay taxes. So it's actually good to actually make them finally feel part of the country. Because you remember, we used to have something like Pwani si Kenya. Because some felt alienated. They felt like, you know what, this is not our country. And when you look at the horror stories about identification, guys who come from the northeastern, that also has to be settled. But slowly but surely, if this is the trend, then we are in for good things. But obviously there will be politics around it because you feel like you've consolidated your block. Now you're trying to reap a few to balance the equation. It's 50+1 at the end of the day.
Yes.
And this one, the margin was too close to call.
Yes, and I mean, Kevin Osido was here immediately after, President William Ruto was declared president, maybe immediately after he was sworn in. And we all agreed that it would be necessary for him to work around how he is going to appeal to the rest of the Kenyans. The 1/3 that did not vote for him and voted for Right Honorable Raila Odinga. The 1/3 that did not even bother to go out there and vote. Step towards the right direction?
Indeed it is.
Okay.
And
because goodies are coming home. Yeah, for you to challenge this.
No, you see, Linda, the thing is that Nyanza region, largely speaking, particularly Luo Nyanza, has not been very favorable to whichever governments that we have had in the past.
You've always been out of government.
Exactly. There are people who've been thrown into oblivion of opposition. And anytime politics is being done, there are people who are automatically known that anyway, serikali ikijengwa nyinyi mtakuwa opposition.
But is it time that you look into that? Or you just try and understand why is it?
But everyone is looking at it.
Look at it's opposition for life.
Look at this. This is not the first time that the president is going into Nyanza, because he went there, remember, for example, when he went to Homa Bay, the governor was not even present. The serious leaders that were expected to welcome him were missing. There was a lot of jeering that was done, particularly from ODM, accusing the president of not engaging them to ensure that he's received properly, and many things were said. So between then and now, beyond what we see happening, there has been a lot of pacification taking place, including even the fact that people are now beginning to realize that serikali ilienda, and that it is no longer the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga who is president, but is actually Dr. William Samoei Arap Ruto. At least today, we recognize him as president, having been elected and sworn in. And therefore, moving forward is to also look at, yes, of course, you have over 15 million people who did not vote for you. And they come from certain places. How do you therefore begin to make them acknowledge that you're president and also realize that indeed you're not just discriminating against them because of the manner in which they vote, but particularly because you have an interest that you want to be magnanimous in your leadership, you want to bring them over to the table, you want to be part and parcel of indeed their suffering, because the people in Nyanza are suffering, they have different sufferings. But second to that is also to look at the development record, Linda, that in a weekend, a region, in addition to the president pledged when he first went there last year, we are recording over 3.6 to 4.7 billion, shillings by the national government that is going to be pumped into a region, bordering on issues around roads and infrastructure, to water projects, to issues around farming and fishing. And it's not just rocket science that you look at that and you begin to ask yourself, so when the president gets into his 7+ choppers that landed into Siaya, what therefore is the role of the leadership and the citizens? Because you will not wait for the president to come back again and ask, so where is the road that we said was going to be built? Where is the fish industry, you know? The governors of the region will be left with work to do. And hence the citizens as well, to hold them accountable and begin to ask, the president was here and the national government pledged X, Y, Z. What are you doing to be able to ensure that we benefit and we reap from those promises that the president made? And I think for me that already begins to do a fourth thing, Linda, which is to reorganize and re-engineer the attitude of the politics of Nyanza region. That indeed, if we have been out of government for all these years, and then suddenly a president comes and makes all these pledges, what if we were in government for all these years that we were not in government? Of course, not to mention issues around the Chebukati government, because there are benefits. For example, where I come from now, we drive on tarmac road, mpaka kwa gate, you know, it's courtesy of the Chebukati government, you know, because roads were done, and of course, people are still struggling with issues around water, which again, you remember that among the last trips that the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, did to Nyanza were pledges around water, you know. But then the president, William Ruto, goes back and the conversation is still water. Water is a devolved function. So then the question is, how do we ensure that when the president gets back to Nairobi, the promises are being done and the county governments are also actually doing their work? Of course, again, to congratulate, as I finish, Mheshimiwa Eliud Owalo, coming from about 14 kilometers from my home in Uyoma.
Yeah.
And so we were happy to receive the president.
The CS.
We received many phone calls to ensure that the president is properly received.
Yes.
But I think that needs to reverberate across the entire country, so that now people at the coast don't think that the president loves Nyanza so much. Of course he does love Nyanza so much, because these are people who have been in the opposition. Same to Nyanza, I mean the coast, and several other areas, particularly those northeastern or dryland areas. But I think the point that the president is sending home is that hamukunipigia kura, but I love you people. I want to work with your leaders. Let's begin to think through this. And remember, in some of his statements, he was saying, mukumbuke bado janini, we still have something ahead. So he was already preparing people around 2027 and maybe 2032, and the people that is preparing to be able to carry on the mantle. Because Linda, mentorship is not a good topic when it comes to Kenyan politics. And maybe the president is looking at the people around him and also taking up the Odingaism perspective from the people of Nyanza, and he's saying, it doesn't have to be one of you. Anyone can come and help you come out of the issues that you're actually struggling with. And so we are looking forward to seeing how the president will work with the leadership of Nyanza. I liked what you asked when Mushendo around James Orengo. Of course, Orengo has been in the opposition. He has a very good story of the opposition. Now he is the governor of Siaya County. What benefits does that really accrue to the people who voted for him from Siaya?
Beyond the events and beyond, you know, what it is that we saw with the leaders, they trying to read what it is that wasn't said, or if it was, then not loud enough, was the fact that there's a possibility that these two sides will come to a point of agreement that there's need for constitutional change. And perhaps, you know, just push it the quick direction, which is not quick per se, but perhaps appears to be easier direction, the parliamentary initiative way. I look at Nordin Kagai as a neutral man here, and as much as I don't know whether he's quite neutral, it's not really hard to know what side he lies, you know, on. And I mean, it was hard at first to get to know where Osido inclines, but then again, eventually he declared, and he said, where President Uhuru Kenyatta says we go is where we will go. We know.
Linda, that was before election.
That was before, right? Let me not spoil things for you, but I'm just trying to... can we start with a neutral person in relation to this thing? Are you not worried that they seem to speak the same language, and we're always reminded that when they speak in the same language, then we need to be scared for a moment?
Thing is, the amendments to Constitution, it's something we dread, because the moment we open up that Constitution, we are alive to the fact that we'll have hyper amendments. Now, the reason for amendments is what we'd want to know. You know, of course, it's not perfect. It has teething issues, but you have to realize that the same implementation has not been done of the Constitution. There's a committee in Senate that is meant to do that, and that has never happened to date. You meet Kenyans who have never even seen a physical copy of the Constitution. So when you tell them you want to change something you feel is wrong, as per you as a politician, whose interest are you serving? But I can tell you for free, if you just look, you know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. You can clearly tell that the president and the former prime minister are in communication. You can tell. It is very evident. And we await to see what they intend to do, because we know for sure there are amendments that are being planned. Whether they will actually meet the threshold is something we wait. If it's going to be the BBI way, I'll come back here like I told you, and I'll tell them again, it will flop. If it is for the benefit of the people, then let's wait and see. I don't want to jump the gun. But I believe there is communication. There are communications happening, because we've seen some talk in Parliament where they're talking about having a leader of opposition with a deputy who was a running mate, and then have them free from criminal and civil litigation. That doesn't suffice, you know. That is not right. Something like that, that will fail, of course. But we wait to see. But I can tell you for free, they are communicating, and there are actually plans for amendment. But if they don't serve the best interests of the people, then we have a problem. I believe, for me, if you ask me, yes, it's 10 years old. And people feel that it's time we change what wasn't perfect. But I still believe a lot of civic education is needed in that constitution. Most people don't even understand it or know it. They understand it courtesy of what the political leader tells them. They tell them that ABCD is happening, and it's wrong. Sometimes it's a lie, and they believe it.
Right.
So there's a lot that needs to be done, and our leaders have a role to play. But sadly they don't, because, you know, they like leading sheep that are not well informed, because it's easier to direct them to where you want them to go.
It is clamor for, I don't know whether clamor is the right word, but yes, there's that general feel that it's the constitutional moment. Forget about those times of the BBI. It is now the constitutional moment. Do you agree to that?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I don't even think that the Kenya Kwanza government will give constitutional amendment a front page or a front role in what they have to deliver. Because one of the biggest platform under which the Honorable William Ruto campaigned on was on economic transformation. And in fact, seriously castigated any form of constitutional reform.
William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya,
yes,
makes some proposals.
Yes.
And, you know, presents them to
yes,
the National Assembly,
yes,
Speaker.
Yes.
And in his proposal, he requests and he hopes that some of these amendments can be done without subjecting people, the people of Kenya, to a referendum. But equally, looking at some of the proposals that he makes, you know, this one's captured on Article 255 of the Constitution, are matters that really would require a referendum. We understand very well that owing to, you know, what it is that played out on the BBI matter, then they were not accorded that, you know, go ahead by the courts because of the person who initiated that. He understands this very well, and he says, well, he is just speaking to Parliament, so we will see whether they
if you look at the letter.
What do you mean they do not?
Yes, if you look at the letter that the Honorable
which I have here
has done, yes, I would like you to go to the final part of that letter.
Yes, let me.
He actually candidly says that he is throwing this as a spanner for people to discuss.
Yes.
He did not extensively solidify his 100 support on the system. He was actually expressing what he believes in.
Can I read it?
Yes, please.
The last one says, I am sensitive, this is a new paragraph.
Yes.
I am sensitive to the current state of our nation, which is settling down after a long season of vigorous political mobilization. For this reason, it is important that we endeavor to pursue only those pathways to institutional changes by means which do not entail the resumption of disruptive and potentially divisive mobilization for a referendum or a campaigning. The proposals set out above, in my considered view, satisfy this critical prudential safeguard. It is my hope then that these proposals elicit appropriate consultation and bipartisan deliberation, and in due course enable the people's representatives to do their part in liberating the country from contradictions and dilemmas which have cost us a lot of opportunity.
Exactly.
This is clearly a person who wants us to have...
Can you listen to his statement? Because I've had so many analysts try to demystify what the president has said. He has categorically said that as a nation, we must pursue ways that do not need to involve the
That's
people.
politely saying, let us not go to the referendum.
That's what I'm telling you.
For a referendum.
You and I know there are sections of these constitutions that are protected, and if indeed we would want to change them, we would be required to do a referendum because they are protected. So what he is simply saying, let us deal with issues that do not really require us to go for a referendum. Now, without a referendum, you cannot talk of constitutional reforms. Because constitutional reforms, there is different from what's called constitutional amendments. Constitutional amendments can be done in parliament, and that is one of the things the Honorable William Ruto is proposing. Because let me tell you, if we were going to talk about a referendum, we have, in our times, all of us here have witnessed two polarized referendums, back to back, almost in a span of 5 years. The one was 2005, the other one was in 2010. We have witnessed how referendums can polarize this nation. In fact, he, the president, William Ruto, was reading one of the side of that referendum in 2010 of saying no to this constitution.
So when this other side says that, the president really is not genuine when he says he'd love for us to have an official opposition office, then they would be right. Because some of this then would require for us to adjust the constitution and not just make the amendments at that level that he speaks.
The proposal, and I think I had the president, one of the days he was launching the housing project, I think in Kibra or somewhere. His proposals, in fact, he is very explicit in saying that yes, we need an opposition office. But you and I know, Noldin, that we cannot have an opposition. Even if we were to do the constitution, change the constitution today, there is no opposition leader that will take up office until the next election is done. So the proposals we have been giving and the ones he has been giving, he has been heard one or twice alluding that they can be contained in the next general election. As we are voting for the next general election, we can take it together with the referendum.
For purposes of people understanding, why do you argue then that, the current, say, face of opposition then cannot take up this until at least we have the next general election?
Because that is the law. If you change the constitution today, matters that are constitutional, like constitutional offices, cannot be uptaken immediately until another election is happening. This is not, it is not an office or a change of constitution that is related to economic development or to social development. We are talking about creating a political office. And that political office, if it is created, I'm not a lawyer like Noldin, but I know this is a political office. You cannot create a political office in the middle of a presidential term and expect it to be uptaken by the person by the current people, because this has been formed after a general election has been done. Now, the point I'm trying to make when the president says we must avoid the referendum, it is because we have an economic agenda that we have promised this nation as Kenya Kwanza government, that we want to change the economic system and models in this country. And for that to settle down and to have a place to start working in this country, you would need a very stable political session of 5 years. If you introduce a referendum right now, it is going to destabilize the country and therefore create a not very good environment for you to implement those economical changes you have promised Kenyans. So it is in the best interest of this Kenya Kwanza government that if there is going to be a referendum in any proposed changes, it is going to be done together with the general election of 2027, because anything that is done between now and 2027, it means that it is going to create an environment that cannot enable you to actually deliver on your economic promises. Yes.
Kevin Osido, school us some more in relation to this.
There are going to be changes. In fact, by March 2023, we are going to experience changes within our political structure. And one of those prominent changes include what is called Office of the Official Leader of Opposition. Now, how it is going to be done, in my view, is political.
Okay.
It can be constitutional, which requires a referendum. It can go back to the presidential goodwill, because the president, in the manner in which we have seen any of them creating offices, including some of which have been unconstitutional, for example, CIS positions, the cabinet administrative secretaries, who actually served for their full term. And even as we are seated here, there is a consideration to have the offices of cabinet administrative secretaries back with the Kenya Kwanza government, for which public participation processes have been going on. There are even proposed nominees into those kind of positions. Now, what the president is trying to do, which also captures or also brings in a discussion that we have had based on the tours that the president has had in the Nyanza region, are some of the unsaid things. Because you see, we have seen pictures of them seated in closed doors, but we don't know what they are saying. Because there was no journalist to record videos of what they are saying. We saw the elder brother of the former prime minister, who was very adamant and said that now we have the state machinery, we are going to win this election. We saw him in CI actually holding the hand of the president. We do not know what they were talking about in those very closed conversations. We do not know, Linda, what the president and the former prime minister are talking about, because they are in conversations and they are having discussions. They are sending emissaries day and night talking to each other. They are having their own personal moments to have talks.
And it's interesting when, these two gentlemen call upon the president to, look into a way of working with the former prime minister. The president then, like he would the previous time, say that, you know what, I will not engage in this and that, tutakunywa chai, but it cannot go beyond this. This time around, he does not say a thing about it.
It cannot be said like that when you have over 15 million people who feel like this government is just for a certain people. As a president, because that is one of your roles as an elected president, you are a symbol of national unity. So the president will try and present his best foot forward, including as a Christian, because I think he has held as many Thanksgiving rallies where the name of God has been mentioned. And one of those, characteristics of God is unity. I don't think President William Ruto wants to leave a legacy of a president who did not unite the people of Kenya, because that has been the biggest prayer of almost every single Kenyan, both at home and also abroad. And so if it will take anything that the president wants to do to be able to be seen as that unifying factor, I think he wants to look at the place and space of the former prime minister, not just as Raila Amolo Odinga, because Raila Amolo Odinga will also pass away. That wind will blow and run and it will go. There are going to be other Raila Amolo Odingas in other people's names and how God wants to use people. And there will be other presidents, past William Samoei Arap Ruto. How then do you begin to have conversations around bringing in the second runners? Because unfortunately, in our Kenyan elections, the second runners up, that person goes home empty-handed. And imagine the degree of mobilization of politics, the kind of involvement, the kind of promises that you put in. The bill that has been proposed.
Why should we think about that? It's a do or die affair. It's a win-lose affair. So once you get to it, you should get to it knowing that. Why should you be rewarded?
Linda, that is how, it's not really a reward, but it's purely based on our democratic framework and process. In other jurisdictions, they actually have offices of leader of official opposition. The person who is mentioned as having garnered the second highest number of votes. It's purely based on the manner in which politics is done. You invest your emotions, resources, attitudes of people and all that. Sadly, for our sake in Kenya, and these are conversations that has been going on since the Kofi Annan moment in 2007 and President John Kufuor when they came here. Beyond the handshake between President Kibaki and the former Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga, there are a number of things that should have been done, including constitutional, among the Agenda 4 issues, constitutional reforms. Unfortunately, again, based on our politics and how we do it, we lost that moment. And the religious leaders in other sectors have been talking about dignifying the office of the official leader of opposition. The religious leaders are also doing their own things. Remember when the president goes to a rally, he is received by certain people. And before he goes to that rally, there are people who come to brief him that, sir, you will come on this day, we'll receive you here, you will have tea here. When they're having that tea, we don't know the magnitude of involvement of this office of official leader of opposition that they are talking about. Right. So I think for me, Linda, the president is sharing his thoughts, which is very proper in my view, that he's writing about them. He's sending them to Kenyans and saying, if it is a parliamentary process, so be it. If it is a referendum, if that is what the people of Kenya feel fit, so be it. Because in 256 of the Constitution of Kenya, we have amendment clauses, a manner in which the Constitution of Kenya 2010 can be amended. And there is no single day you can say that the economy is so bad we don't want a referendum. It is based on the context and what the people are feeling. So when people feel like, yeah, the economy is bad because we don't have an official leader of opposition who can tell the president you are spending too much money in rallies and all that, let's vote for the person in and we have a referendum and have the office. If the people have a feeling like, no, this thing will take too much of our time, we are coming from an election, like the president is finishing his statement, the people will have their say. But I think it should be left as open, as is purely presented by the Constitution, that we do what Kenyans feel is fit based on the context of the context and the moment of the day.
Allow us to take a short break, then we come back, expound further on that, as we also take a look at the exit of Chebukati and the two other commissioners that officially say goodbye today. Close of business after this break.
You are watching TV 47, the home of untold stories.
Je, maumivu ya kichwa na kukosesha amani? Kaluma Strong hutuliza maumivu ya kichwa, maumivu ya mwili na hata huondoa joto jingi mwilini. Kaluma Strong ina aspirin kama kiungo. Maumivu yakizidi, muone daktari.
Are you looking for a distinguished institution of academic and professional excellence to kickstart your career? Then join KIPS Technical College, a top NEC, CASNEB and NEET examination center in Kenya that is fully accredited by TVET Authority with over 90% national exam pass rate. We offer high quality, hands-on training in engineering, hospitality, tourism, journalism, ICT, business, accounting, hairdressing and beauty, health sciences, community development and foreign language, and have placed over 26,000 graduates since 1994. Our state-of-the-art equipment, well-equipped workshops, indoor and outdoor sports facilities make us the preferred choice.
During my training, I was able to become Miss KIPS, which has helped me to achieve my goals in community development.
Admissions for January 2023 intake is ongoing. For more information, call 0720-813-113 or visit any of our 6 campuses located within Nairobi. KIPS Technical College, your sure path to success.
Kaluma King Herbal Lozenges zinazo nguvu maradufu kutuliza kikohozi, vidonda vya koo na mafua. Kaluma King ni shwari.
Tika mama huyo muharifu kaiba kuku zangu, vifaranga wangu na mayai zote pia kabeba. Aya, tika mama huyo.
Maumivu yakizidi, muone daktari.
You are watching TV 47, the home of untold stories.
Gentlemen, we have about 30 minutes to close this one, but not before we speak of the era of Chebukati. Perhaps not so much, but to commend these three, first time in history, they managed then to get to the very last bit of their term. That is 6 years of service, and it's not been an easy road, especially actually for the three of them. They've been here long enough to have witnessed their fellows also exit the stage, and some resigning. It's really not been quite well. What do you make of the end of an era that Chebukati feels was worth the cost, but he leaves us saying that there's a lot of probe that needs to be done. There's a lot of revamping. There's a lot of renovation, if you wish. There's a lot of reforms that really need to be done in the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and especially on the aspect of interference.
First and foremost, I think, this weekend we are straight from a boxing match where we lost to our brothers.
That one though.
And I think Chebukati was still in his Sungunyo moment, because that was the last day he would send a punch to those who were anti-him.
Yes.
And he did it using his own words. There are those who see him as a hero. Then there are also those who see him as a villain. Those who feel that, and they have said that he should be jailed. And if you look at his tenure, for example, and if you go and look at 2017, then the hero worship would actually have a stain, because I don't believe he has been a perfect chairperson. Nobody is perfect, yes, but he has his own problems. And IEBC as it is has issues, very many issues. But the biggest issue is political interference. But you'd be lying to yourself, telling yourself that we're going to fill those 6 because we're waiting for Masit to know her fate. We're going to fill those 6 or 7 and feel that there will be no political interference. That would be a lie, because when you look at the current the IEBC Act, I know there are going to be amendments. The current IEBC Act talks about four people from the Parliament Service Commission. You have 1 from LSK. You have 1 from the Religious Council.
Yeah.
And you'll be lying to yourself if you tell yourself that even the LSK doesn't have an allegiance, or it doesn't
incline to a certain
place, even the Religious Council or Parliament. So, and as we're just from saying, there are conversations happening between the former Prime Minister and the President. Who is to say that we will not have an agreement where you take the chairperson and take the vice chairperson?
Okay.
And that is the problem that we usually have. And that is why every other time some set of commissioners either resign or actually some denounce results. Because he talked about integrity, which is key. Whether they profess integrity, the 3 of them, is a matter that time will tell. Because he's spoken so much and he's laid blame on so many people. But in the course of time, we will get to know whether whatever they did was true or false. Because I do believe they talk about having a commission. Now, who sets up the commission? Because if it's going to be set up with if the notion is ready, it doesn't make sense. But if it's going to be a genuine commission, then we'll get to understand whatever we're being told happened behind closed doors. Because you have to realize he has mentioned NSAC officials. Some are career officials who, one of them is a vice CDF of the country, who is actually in line to be the CDF. So if at all you mean he tried to change the results, are you telling us then he won't be the CDF? You see, there is so much that is there when you just make statements, and then we say, because when you were with the president, I remember, he said that it's not time to have that commission. Yeah. So what happens to a person like the VCDF?
Okay.
Because your name is tainted, your image is tainted. When will you ever clear your name? And when we get to see that you don't ascend to that seat, or you ascend as an ambassador somewhere, is that the answer you're waiting for? So a lot has been said, and they're speaking a lot as IEBC. I believe we really need an independent commission in IEBC. The next officials will come in, because the vacancy will be out as from tomorrow. I hope so, because it says 7 days whenever there's a vacancy. So we're waiting to see a gazettement. But my biggest problem is the political interference.
Yeah.
And sadly, we won't go so far from it.
Because it's a political process, and that has to be acknowledged. And then again, we cannot live in fear, because after all said and done, this has to be done. And maybe very fast, because what are the likelihoods of us having a by-elections? Very high. Without us even having to look at this conversation that we've had on the change of the constitution or amendment of the constitution, if we are to go a referendum, then we would require for this office to be perhaps fully constituted, yeah, or so to speak. So just what do you make of the reign of Chebukati, which I think the Kenya Kwanza government will look at as a hero? And what do you make of the fact that then this office is still in
Well, I must congratulate him for being the first chairman to actually end his
and it's not
last day.
Yeah?
The last day. Yeah?
Give it to him.
You're going to give it to him.
Yeah.
He has served his entire term.
Yeah.
And I think for me, he feels good about himself, being the first person to have served his entire term under this constitution. Now, it has not been easy, yes. It has been a challenge. It has been a struggle here and there. Well, as a supporter of Kenya Kwanza government, I would obviously say that he tried his best. And we would be lying to Kenyans if we said that the IEBC has existed in the last 6 years without flaws. In fact, they have had so many flaws. But the fact that Chebukati has overcome the political heat that has been there in the last 6 years, it is not easy having adjudicated on 2 elections that have ended up in the Supreme Court, because the 2 elections he has adjudicated on have ended up in the Supreme Court. Nonetheless, he has been vindicated one way or the other that he has tried. Well, there's one thing that you cannot separate from IEBC, it's the political interference. The very fact that the appointment of commissioners is initiated politically, this cannot be an independent commission without political interference, because who is going to gazette the committee, the selection committee?
The politicians.
It's the politicians. Where are they going to end up being grilled? It is in Parliament.
Yeah.
These are politicians. So one way or the other, the person that we are or the people we are going to settle on are a product of a political process that is enshrined in law. And therefore, anybody dreaming and thinking that you can separate the process of IEBC commissioners being picked from politics, you can go and dream and think.
So what are we saying? That it should not have been declared an independent office?
That's what I'm saying is, all I'm saying is this. If we really wanted to say that this independent electoral commission should be out of politics, we should have come up with a process that does not involve politicians
completely.
But as long as this process starts, actually, the genesis of this process starts with the biggest politician in the nation, and that is Excellency the President, who gets to appoint the selection committee. That appointment of that selection committee, he is going to nominate the people he thinks that are worthy for that job as far as he is concerned. And therefore, these people will also serve interest of other people. And therefore, when they pick those commissioners will be picked because of the interest of other people. Therefore, by the time that commissioner is sworn into office, he has so much interest to take care of that you can no longer declare the word independent. And that's basically the problem. Let's face the fact. Whoever the commissioners that are going to end up in that commission in a few months from now, those people are a product of a political process. And therefore, I will not say that it is not fair, because the people who are sitting in Parliament today are the representative of the Republic of Kenya. These are people we have donated our authority in Article 1. And therefore, whatever they come out with, they are doing the best that the people of Kenya did by electing those people. Whether you elected that person based on crazy, because there are people who are in parliament because of so many crazy reasons. I can tell you 80% of members of parliament are not in parliament because of the responsibilities that are enshrined in the constitution. That is a fact. So whether you elected them because of reasons that do not exist in law or otherwise, these are the people you elected to parliament, and these are the people who are going to be involved in the process of picking the next electoral commission. And therefore, in a nutshell, whether those people went and absconded duty and do no longer represent the Republic of Kenya, legally, whatever they pick, they are picking on your behalf. And you cannot complain because under Article 1, you donated that authority to them. So, talking about Independent Electoral Commission?
Forget it.
However,
at least some hope here.
Yeah, what we are saying is not that there's a special class of people who become commissioners in these independent commissions. If you look at the 17 commissions in Chapter 15 of the Constitution, because that's where they are, any Kenyan can and should apply for those jobs. As Kevin Osido have been called twice. One was just at when the 4 other commissioners of IEBC were being recruited.
Are you guys not worried for Kevin Osido?
I was called to apply. Please don't be worried.
Thousand ways to die.
You know?
And then the caller said, then the caller said, please make sure that you lobby the politicians.
Yes.
I said, okay, lobby the politicians. No, I didn't apply, I didn't lobby anyone. But interestingly, I found my name in one of the lists to go and share recommendations to the select committee, which I did very patriotically as a Kenyan, and I shared what I think needed to be done. I was very happy that one of the things that I shared with the select committee was bringing in young people's voices. And so IEBC actually had a youth desk in these 2022 elections, where many of young people's issues, they had more or less like a small IEBC of the youth within IEBC.
But it did perform well, because even in the process of registration, you realized that the youth really
I am coming to that, which is part of what my co-panelists are sharing, the flaws of IEBC. Because the manner in which you communicate to the youth of the TikTok generation, you have to really move to where they are. But that's a story of another day. The second call I received is not more than a month ago. Commission on Revenue Authority, when the commissioners were being recruited. They were sworn in last week, I think. I was again called and told, please apply as a commissioner, but please make sure that you lobby the politician. Now remember that anybody can apply. So when you see the Gazette, the Gazette notice, please apply. But what we are saying is the interferences by the politicians. And that is why sometimes we ask ourselves, hey, how did that person get there? Because even when they speak, you are
really,
like, did this person finish their class 4 English? You know, it's purely based on what the politician sees in that person and the value which they add. Which is where I think that, in my view, I want to appeal to Kenyans. When we see Parliament now beginning to discharge the IEBC amendment bill, I think it's from January 19th is tomorrow. Just 19th, this week, when they are recalled back to Parliament ahead of the recess, when they call for public participation processes, let Kenyans wake up and go and attend and share their sentiments, their views, the good things, the bad things, and the most ugly things which they see about the IEBC and all these processes. Number 2, I think that the former chairman, Mheshimiwa Chebukati, has a lot to tell Kenyans. And maybe I want to appeal to him to write a book about elections in Kenya. In 2017, we had a Supreme Court petition that left Kenyans with unanswered questions. We moved on, and people were told, just look at it like that, take it and move on. We had commissioners resigning, Connie Maina moved over, people like Rosalyn Akombe, who today actually manages global elections through the UN agency and all that. We had people like Margaret Mwachanja leaving office, people like Commissioner Paul Kurgat, circumstances around which we really do not know. Mr. Musando was murdered at the heart of a few days to an election.
Right.
Kenyans do not know. This was happening under I almost said President Chebukati. Chairman Chebukati's reign.
Yeah.
Fast forward 2022, Supreme Court process, hot air, opaque. Kenyans have been left with many unanswered questions.
And that is why I was wondering when
especially
Linda
Linda, before you come in,
yes,
we had people like Mheshimiwa Raphael Tuju coming to the media and saying, I saw commissioners as auctioneers. What do auctioneers do? They auction. What did commissioners go to auction in Mheshimiwa Tuju's home? And even said he has CCTV footage. These are things which really leave Kenyans perturbed and disturbed around elections, which is why I think when we talk about issues around voter turnout, we need to go beyond the work that IEBC does to looking at how we communicate election issues, processes, and all that.
Yeah.
Of course, the post-election evaluation report is out, which was launched yesterday.
Yes.
I have to congratulate the chairman for making it as public as it was.
Yeah.
Let Kenyans read it. But I think the IEBC Commission has much more work to do in terms of helping Kenyans to understand what that report has, what it entails, particularly around the electoral cycle, because already the process towards 2027 elections has already started. What role should Kenyans do beyond the ambassadors, the government officials that filled up that room? There are people who manage elections, people who mobilize for gangs, people who scare women candidates. They were not in that room. Issues around curriculum for voter education, and civic education for Kenya. Kenya has gone into 2 elections without a curriculum for 2017 and 2022. Why? It is the mandate of the commission. But why does it not really look very important for as many people as Kenyans who are registered to vote coming in to be taught? Which is why we see issues around spoiled votes, rejected ballots, which contribute towards the negative ends of the work that IEBC is supposed to do. Of course, they enumerated the uptakes in terms of the prisons. I think it was the highest since post-election 2010, post-constitution of Kenya 2010. We saw diaspora numbers also going quite high up. They did a lot of good work in terms of navigating all those logistical issues, opening up the servers. I think largely speaking, as much as they were open, there were interferences, which they acknowledged yesterday, over 2 million plus people who are trying to, get in and either look at the results or interfere with the servers. So IEBC has a lot of questions, in my view, to help Kenyans to understand beyond what the Supreme Court judges told us.
And I like the fact that you say to help Kenyans, because much as we say these ones have managed to go to the last day of their term, with lots of controversy, and these crucial matters really need to be addressed. And so as we celebrate Chebukati, we hope that even in these proposals that he's made, he's going to be instrumental in making sure some of the reforms then are, witnessed. But you speak of a curriculum, it reminds me that we've not touched on anything to do with education. Story for another day, because we have to be out of this space in the next 7 minutes.
It's also,
Nordin has to say
as he says, it's also important to note that the incoming commissioners have a very important task coming up. Border delimitation.
Of boundaries.
It is a very serious affair. If you people were here when we were doing the border race just before the 2013, I have not seen something hotly contested in this republic like how we set our border race.
Let's enlighten Kenyans.
Yes.
Of course, there's a timeline up until the 2024.
Yes.
Must they, or
they have to,
because it's necessary? I mean, if it's not necessary, well, in as much as we all agree that it is necessary based on what we saw with the BBI.
You see, when you look at Article 89, it says not less than 8 years and not more than 12 years. So you see, the commissioners that are going to come in have to do this.
They must?
They must.
Yes. It's a must.
Because, and they are guided on how they'll do that. Because you look at the population quota. Now, the issues are, like you rightfully said, those boundaries will bring about a lot of it.
Yes.
Because there are some constituencies that might be collapsed, and which will bring about issues. That's why you see there's this conversation that has been last year about telling people sijui muzae watoto wangapi. You get which is funny. Which is funny, no mtafute kura, you know. So that is why when we talk about the next commission, it needs to be a serious commission, because otherwise that will be handled in a shoddy way, which will bring about issues in the next election, that is 2027. Because if they do it also too late, then they can't apply on that election in 2027. It has to be done not just 12 months too, it should be earlier. Because if they do it late, it doesn't apply.
Okay.
Now, the other thing he talked about was voter education. You see, there are so many people who didn't vote, and IEBC doesn't know why. And if you look at the report, they don't know why people don't vote. That is voter education. There's this notion that whether I vote or not, the vote has already been stolen.
Yeah.
And that tells you IEBC needs to save face. As it is, as he talks about what they did and I know and what have you, they need to realize that people have lost confidence in IEBC. How do you gain that back? Then the next commissioners need to be appointed people with integrity, high level of integrity, and that is Chapter 6 must apply in this. If it doesn't, people won't vote again, because they'll say, why am I voting? That person will just win at the end of the day, because this has been stolen before the elections. And that is what we need to change, because we're talking about voter apathy. People don't understand why. He talked about the youth. It's not just about how you communicate to them. They don't even know the importance of voting. Why am I voting? Why am I queuing all this? You know.
And perhaps that is our greatest problem today.
Because when you have the commission as it is, no one is even close to being youthful in that commission that just left. The sad reality. So how are they going to communicate? And some of them were proudly saying, sijui Kiswahili.
What is the essence?
Let me tell you.
Yes.
This holiday I was fortunate enough to host all my sister's kids, my brother's kids, and they are there. Some of them are just about approaching teenage.
Yes.
And looking at them, when I stay at home all day, they have no space for news. They are either on Netflix, they are either on DStv,
TikTok,
or TikToking and all those things. Instagram. They have no opportunity to sit. In fact, they cannot even wake up to come and see us talk on TV this morning. Then that is the generation we are talking about, Linda. How effective are we going to communicate with them? One of the things I would say the Commissioner Tellibre felt, it is to come up with communication system that reached out to the youth. Because putting up adverts on TV to young people who have no business watching TV, it was waste of resources. Putting out adverts on newspaper, I will tell you myself, it is either I have seen this newspaper here on studio or in the office. Those youths, most of them do not get to go to the office and what. So if they are TikToking, how can you as a commission
get them
package a message that is going to resonate with those people who are TikToking? How are you going as a commission to package a message that is going to resonate with that person who loves tweeting and leading tweets? That person who is on Facebook, that person who loves to be on IG. Look at the leading communication companies. They have made the thread of communicating with people to that level of TikTok. If you look at leading telecommunications and go to their Facebook and see how they relate with the people who make funny comments, you realize that they have understood the art of communicating with those people. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenge in government today, it is packaging of communication. Today, Linda, if you continue to do communications in the normal way you did 5 years ago, you will be left behind by a very serious generation. That is why today, as I am speaking here on TV 47, someone can stream on YouTube, someone can see it on Facebook, someone can follow it on Twitter. There is someone who is behind there cutting some quotes and putting them on your IG or wherever, because the idea is you want to communicate with every person at his or her own level. And I think that is one of the problems the IEBC faced. We had so many potential voters to be registered, but you put out communication out in platforms where those people do not visit. You refused to package a message that would resonate by that person at his medium of exchange.
That is why the choirs were there to entertain Kenyans.
Even yesterday, you must have seen them yesterday,
yes,
and they did a good job.
But I think in addition to all this is a recommendation that I think I'm very passionate about. How come M-Pesa works so well globally and we have to queue to vote?
Thank you.
Why can't the new commissioners digitize and just make it easy for Kenyans to vote at the comfort of their homes while they are drinking uji and potatoes, or from the office? Why must we close businesses? Why must people be so scared of traveling? Because Kenyans are doing elections. Why must people in whichever state travel to New York to go and vote miles and miles, and IEBC does not even buy their air ticket? You know, let's aim towards, as much as we open the servers and see all these things happening, let the commission also work towards making our voting process digital.
Okay.
If M-Pesa is working, and I have the trust that even if I vote for the wrong person, I can call. If I send money to the wrong person, I can call and my money is reversed, you know. Why can't it work for elections?
You know, they should copy the government. The government is saying it's going paperless.
Yes.
So they should also try and go paperless. I don't know whether they'll do it or not. It needs a lot of planning, but I hope they can. One recommendation that I agree with him is funding. And in the appropriate time, because when you fund them too late, then they can't do anything.
It also is
a good thing about moving to the digital way is that it reduces this issue of procurement of papers, which is always a scandal. So we move away from that as well. So you seal the loophole on corruption there as well. You get? But I believe in what he said. I'm sure he's talking about Generation Z. To capture them, it's very easy.
Gen Z.
It's very easy. What you can do, if they are watching that, is what you need to do is work with content creators for them to see it's cool to vote. It's my right to vote. If you look at the USA, for example, the celebrities that these young people follow, actually, they are very active in elections. But ours is just about scandals and silly, what they call kiki. They have nothing beyond that.
Chasing.
So it's about cloud chasing. So if the new commission can incorporate celebrities that actually have a following, that can actually plan ahead and help people vote, then
whether they'll be fashionable by the time we're doing the next
election.
Then, gentlemen, you have to take
then make elections meaningful.
Yeah.
When you are voted as an MCA and we tell you the road is bad,
do it.
And you have money in the budget, do it.
Okay.
When you are voted as a governor and we tell you ECD is not working the way we have put it, and the bursaries are not getting to the right people because of your nasty political dealings.
Which governor?
We have a government coming on board. It's not polypoly.
Let me tell you a fact. Let me tell you a fact.
As we close, yes.
Most of elected leaders we have, all they are doing is grandstanding. And doing a lot of PR gimmicks out there and telling people that we are doing business. Look at almost 80% of the counties. Uliza Osindo kutoka wakati tulichaguana August na alikuwa December, alikuta maendeleo gani kwao?
Na unajua yeye ni anaangalia mambo ya
what the governors
apart from what the president is bringing.
What the governors must do, they must stop grandstanding. They must start working for the people. If you are elected as an MCA, as a member of parliament, as a senator, kindly work for the people. Don't treat people to PR gimmicks, because unajua Mswahili alisema bio za sakafuni huishia ukingoni. So you can operate, unaweza chaguliwa na PR kama member of parliament, member of the senate, member of the county assembly, but as a president and the governor,